All right, I'm pretty sure everyone actually knows what it stands for. Who's used NFC? Who's played with it? Okay. Um, so the basic gist of this is that when you start digging in, the further you dig in, the more you find out, the more nuances you find related to what NFC really means, what it some people think it means. It gets a little crazy. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how it's secure, where it's not secure, where it doesn't try to be secure. There are a lot of a lot of great, exciting talks on the conference circuit right now about, ooh, I broke NFC, yay. Well, you can do the same thing with a QR code in many cases. It's really, at the end of the day, it's a cute way to get data into, out of mobile devices. It's got some really cool applications, but I hope nobody is really approaching it and expecting a whole heck of a lot of security, as far as that goes. So these are my friends, John and Larry. They were roommates in university, good buddies, early adopters like most of the people in this room. Always grabbing the new gadget, always playing with the new toy. Always trying to one-up each other and have a good time. So one day John picks up a Samsung Galaxy Nexus. As he's setting it up, finds that great checkbox, either yes or no for NFC. And like most of the people we know, hits the interwebs to figure out what is it? What does it do? Do I want this checkbox on? Do I want it off? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? What do I do? So that guy. At the end of the day, if you really do some digging, you find there are three kind of main understandings of what NFC is. First one is really any close-range wireless communication. If you look hard enough, you see people talking about Bluetooth as NFC, or Wi-Fi if the devices are close enough. That's like, yeah, okay, yeah, near radio field communication, sure, you can kind of get away with calling it that, but that's obviously not what most people are thinking. The next category, ISO 18092, most of what people call NFC enabled, NFC capable, and all of NFC falls into this bucket. This is kind of the main core spec that makes up most of the high frequency RFID type activities. We're talking about 2 loop antennas in near field communicating, induction, magnetic induction. So this entirely encompasses all of NFC, but there are a whole lot of other areas, payment systems, lots of the transit systems, some of the hotel key cards, all kind of fall into this bucket, but aren't really NFC. And then finally we get to everything above this, also exchanging what they call NDEF records. So the NFC forum, which was set up to kind of promote and extend and advance NFC, the cause of NFC, has defined this standard, and it's just a really simple framework for exchanging information. NDEF, NFC data exchange format. I'll show you in a few minutes. It's really simple. But if you're doing all of these things, you can then go to the NFC forum and get blessed and get an official stamp of approval that, yes, this is really an NFC application. Hurrah. All kinds of exciting. All right. So NFC forum defines 4 tag types. Topaz, made by Broadcom, or a division of Broadcom called Innovision. These are really fast. These are really light. They're also really small. You're usually talking about 256 bytes. Good for a URL, maybe a very small V card, not a lot more than that. The NXP Philips, there's actually 2 categories. The Type 2 cards are commonly referred to as MyFair Classic and MyFair Ultralight. Those fit into there. They are also pretty small, under a K worth of storage. They use the MyFair standard. We'll talk about the communication standards in a bit. There is another version. There's an imaginary Type 5 that includes the 1K tags, which in theory include 2K, 4K, and 8K. But this is also made by NXP Philips, and it is a slightly different memory structure. It's also got different authentication structure. NFC Forum hasn't blessed it. They keep threatening to. However, Samsung, and I've heard as recently as yesterday that Nokia has also started using that as their as one of their common tag types. So if you get the Samsung Tactile app and you get the tags that come with it, they're actually 1K tags, which means NFC devices out in the field aren't necessarily required to support them. Only devices that are explicitly coded to do so can support these tags. So one thing to be careful of is if you're going to put NFC in a public environment, you've got to be very careful to select one of the 4 tag types so that everyone can read it. Otherwise, you run into a condition where it's possible you can put a tag out there, your NFC device can read it, your buddy's NFC device can read it, but somebody else can't because it's not actually following the spec. The Type 3 tags made by Sony, they range from, I think you can get them as small as 64K and all the way up to 8K. These are god-awful slow, but they've got good crypto, they've got good write protect capability, they've got good security. They're also kind of expensive. There's the MyFair DesFire line. This is the Type 4 tag, also by NXP Philips. They've got their hand in a lot of this. There are a couple different variants of the DesFire. We'll talk about that later. There's one type that's really good, and the others are functionally broken, not really practical yet. But just kind of real quick summarization, if you want to do like a URL, something simple, Type 1, Type 2 tags are great. If you want to do something that requires some real security, for lack of a better term, if you want to do something, put it out in the public, make it available, and expect that no one's going to be easily able to change it, you probably want to do something like a Type 3, Type 4. There's also, if you need something large URL, you need to go there. It's Type 4. So I'm sorry for the wall of text. This is kind of how things stack up, and it's, I'll be honest that I actually left out a couple layers because they're just confusing and not really necessary to explain it. Down at the bottom, you've got what they call a wired interface. There's an ISO standard to describe the connection between the radio and the transponder. And for some reason, they wanted to specify that, but nothing else at the low level. 18003 ISO talks about the 2-loop antennas in close proximity. So RFID falls under that. Pretty much anything inductive. So the ISO 092 we talked about already. This is where normal HID cards or prox cards fall into this category, but they're a different frequency. They're a much lower frequency. Anything NFC is going to be the 13.56 megahertz. That's going to be just commonly referred to as the high frequency cards. The antenna can also be a lot smaller. I've got some examples over here of quarter-sized antennas. So I'm going to jump up here to NFC IP2. This layer is really important in some of the more advanced apps. If you've got 2 smart devices talking to each other, they're usually capable of speaking any one of these protocols. So you've got a layer here that they added, as well as any card type. So you've got a layer here added to negotiate between the 2 devices which combination of protocols you're going to speak. So they've got this built in here. Over here, we've got LLCP is low-level communication protocol, 2 devices communicating directly with each other. So if you've seen the Samsung ads, you hold 2 Samsung phones together and they zap a movie or something like that. That's usually going to happen in LLCP and simple NDEF exchange protocol. Simple. ISO 15693 is called vicinity cards. Not very common in the wild. They work to about a meter and a half. So much longer range. 14443 is the most common. If you've got an NFC or MyFair card in your pocket, it's most likely one of those. There are 3 subclasses. Type A is MyFair. Type B is a patent-free version of A. So it's just same kind of concepts, just patent-free. Type C, the Sony Felica standard was actually proposed as Type C and rejected. So that's why I threw a star in there. Cool. Yeah, so we got the 4 types again, and then that magic fifth type called NXP, or Type 5, depending on who you talk to. On top of that, we've got NDEF, which we'll talk about in a minute. And NDEF itself has a number of use cases. Smart poster, URL, vcard, you can all read that. We'll talk about those in a second. So there are also, beyond the standardized use cases, there are a couple others I'll run through real quick in a minute. All right, so John thinks this NFC thing's cool. He's going to go try it. He buys a few tags. The first one he sticks on his coffee table and programs it for Wi-Fi handover. The handover app's pretty cool. You program in your Wi-Fi details. So when your buddies come over, they swipe their phone and poof, they're on your network. You don't have to key in your web key, whatever. You can also do the same thing with Bluetooth. So the next tag he's going to install, he's going to stick it next to the front door. When he comes home, tag his phone and text his girlfriend. Hey, I'm home. Finally, he'll stick one on the shelf in the refrigerator to remind himself to pick up milk on the way home. Really simple applications, really kind of the speed that NFC was really intended for. Low security requirement, nothing major going on, but it's just kind of convenient, less typing on your phone. That's really what you're doing. At the end of the day, a lot of these could also be done with QR codes with the right app. All right, so we've got the use cases. And actually, in most cases, if you look at the tag, phone calls, SMS messages, and a number of others are actually implemented as a URL. So it's just nice and easy to parse. vCard falls under the MIME, and you can actually include any MIME object that will fit on the card. So if you want to send an image or Excel file, whatever, it'll fit in there. So these are kind of the standard known use cases that most NFC devices can support. There are also non-standard use cases. So Samsung's got an app. There are a couple other apps, third-party apps you can get where you program a tag and say, hey, set the alarm, change the brightness, change the ringer volume, whatever. It will write a URL to the tag that will tell the phone what to do, but it won't necessarily work for devices that don't have that app. So that's kind of another gotcha. Is if you're gonna put a tag in the public field, you've got to be careful to make sure that the application you're using is using a standard NDEF format that other applications can understand. Cover the NDEF format here real quick. There are two main components: the message, which is literally just an array of records. It has no header, no footer. It's just a set of records. The key thing to note here is mobile devices, as of this moment, only support one NDEF record when reading from a static device, so a tag or a passive device. However, if you want two active devices to talk to each other, you can exchange as many as you want. So this actually has great implications from security. If I find a tag in the wild, I can, even if it's not write protected, I can add additional apps or additional records after it, but the device isn't going to listen to them. It's only going to pay attention to the first one. So it's a little bit harder to stuff in something malicious after the fact. So the NDEF record has a very simple format. You've got message begin, message end bits. Chunk flags, in case 4 bytes of payload size isn't enough for you. If you want a 4 gig payload, you can chunk it into multiple records. So if you set the short record bit, you lose 3 bytes of payload, so you're limited to 255 bytes. A lot of the tags you see in the wild are actually shorter like that. You've also got the ID field and ID length. I haven't actually seen them used. The idea is you'd put a URL or some UUID on the tag so you could tell whether you've seen it before. There's a bit that you can turn off there and pack it in. Most of the tags you see in the wild have the short format. Very, very compressed, very simple. And then you've got the type name field. Type name format. The type name, 3 bytes, simply tells the application what format to expect the type in. It's either going to be well-known, which is very simple, U for URL, SP for smart poster. There are a couple others, or it's going to be a MIME type in the vast majority of cases. So literally just the text/plain would be a perfect example there. There are a couple others for other applications that you want to get creative and include a URI or your own random string. Again, it's a pretty simple format. All right, so our buddy Larry decides to not to be outdone, he goes out and picks up a Galaxy S3 and decides to have some fun with John. So what was the buy milk tag in the refrigerator? Suggested he should probably go buy Larry more beer. And hey honey, I'm home is, now emails John to say, Larry to say, come over and eat some of John's food. This brings us to the quite important topic of write protect. Right out of the box, all of these tags are read-write. You can order tags written, hard-coded from the factory that cannot be changed by any currently known method. If you're going to put a tag in the wild, that's definitely the way to do it. Some offer, Topaz among others, offer a one-time program feature. Watch out. Each bit can be set to 1 once. So if I can make your URL on this tag malicious by flipping a couple zeros to 1, that's fair game. I'll talk about the key-based stuff in a few minutes. Don't use it if you can ever help it. That's usually in the MyFair keys, or the MyFair cards. The access bits is actually pretty slick. There's a structure in some of these cards where you can say, if it's got 1 or 2 keys, you can say which key is allowed to read and which key is allowed to write. And it's possible to set it up in such a way that no key is allowed to write. Locking the tag, it's permanent, and so far it's actually rather reliable unless you bought the card from China. Finally, most of the apps you're going to find for a mobile device have a soft write protect option, which might as well be called non-existent. It sets a bit in the text that asks the next app not to write it. I swear it. I thought it was a joke when I first saw it myself. So if you want to put a tag out in the field and be secure, there are a couple proposed options. One of them's NFC Sec. It's actually using elliptic curve DH and AES, and looks like pretty good crypto design, pretty good spec. Unfortunately, most of the tags can't handle the processing required. There's two-way negotiation with the DH. You've got to actually have a smart device on both sides. Some of the Desfire and the Felica tags can do most of this. Unfortunately, nobody's using it. I grabbed this a couple weeks ago, noticed the update date. These are the defined crypto configurations for the NFC Sec standard, and right now the organization that created it in the first place is the only one registered. Doesn't look like it's heavily used, and I haven't actually seen any examples publicly available. There's another one called NFC SIG. It adds a new record to the NDEF message with a signature. Unfortunately, unless you have an external reliable trust network, that signature is going to get huge because you're going to need the entire chain of trust in there, which immediately means you're onto a bigger card, possibly too big for most cards. So again, we don't see this used in the wild very much. Also, the mobile devices that are only going to read the first record are going to ignore the signature anyway. So this one doesn't get very far. All right, so John's learned his lesson. Write protect before he walks away from the tag. Pretty easy. So I was in the airport and saw this. And one of the things, it took me a couple times passing by it before I realized what was going on. There are actually instructions here that if you unlock your Galaxy S3, turn on NFC, and hold it up to that spot in the poster, you'll actually get, in this case, I think it's a free ebook or a free song or something. So, obviously I whipped out my Galaxy Nexus and read the tag instead of scanning it, and it points to a URL and whatever. But it's pretty clear from this to me that most people take a little bit. If you walk by the same poster in the airport and saw a QR code, you know exactly what to do with it. You know there was the QR capability, you know what to do. But that's pretty non-intuitive. So the NFC Forum has come out with this guy. It's called the N-Mark. And the idea is when you see this, you're supposed to have trained yourself to immediately wave your phone at it. Not convinced it's a good idea. Also, you got to be a little careful. They're a little protective of their copyright. I actually had to put a warning that this is not actually NFC enabled because they don't want people to get confused with things that should be NFC enabled. At least I don't think, no. All right, so no point other than I'm interested to see what's going to happen over time as people start to kind of share that this is NFC capable. Another thing you discover when you start looking at possible malicious activity with tags is, all right, I've put a tag, say I'm running a restaurant and I put a tag on the counter with my Facebook like link. What's keeping somebody from coming along, slapping their own tag over it to kind of counteract my tag? One of the things there is there's actually a read race going on. When a passive tag ends up in a field, the first thing it's going to do is emit an anti-collision ID, pseudo-unique identifier that's going to tell the device all the tags that are in the field. The first device, in the case of most mobile devices, or all mobile devices, and most actual reader devices, the first anti-collision ID that was received is the only tag it cares about. There could be 37 other tags in the field. It's only going to care about the first one it gets. So I did a little racing, and this is just the order as far as power up, initialize, how fast the tag will get the UID to you. So if I had a 1K on the counter and somebody slapped a topaz on top of it, that topaz is going to win every time. So it's one of the other things you want to consider is how do you, how would you keep that safe? How do you keep somebody from slapping a tag over yours or under yours, and then possibly exposing your customers or users to some form of risk? So I put this guy together. The idea is simple. If you put a piece of glass in front of the tag, you can easily see whether something's been stuck on it. And actually, customers can figure that out pretty quickly that, hey, there's something stuck there or there's not. A poster, drawing, whatever you want, indicating, hey, wave your phone here, and foil and some kind of blocking, and it'll actually do the right thing. Do note that not all tags, most tags don't work directly on metal. It's something you need to try. There are tags you can buy for the manufacturing industry that are designed to be slapped right to a piece of metal for shipment. Most tags don't, so you need some kind of spacer if you're going to put a backstop in there. All right, so Larry decides he's gonna play with loyalty cards at his company, his restaurant. So he comes up with a pretty simple offer. You buy 3 meals and you get a free starter. It's easy to do. All the servers have phones. They can update everybody's card on the fly. Decides to use MyFair 1K cards. All good or something. This is when we get to stored value. The card up there is actually a Sony Felica used in the Japanese subway system called Soika. All indications are the Soika cards and the Felica cards are actually pretty rock solid. There's not a lot of indication that anyone's broken through those yet. And I'd actually expect quite a bit of indication because there's actually stored value right on the card. They do back it up with a database, but technically it's not an NFC app because it's not exchanging NDEF, but it's using 18092. It's using all the same stuff. The Desfire EV1 series is also known to be good at this time. There are other Desfire series cards that are, one of them is known practically broken, and one of them is theoretically functionally broken, but it takes, I think, $45,000 worth of equipment and seven days to crack it. So depending on how motivated your attacker is, if he's going to get an order of mozzarella sticks, that's probably not a big problem. All right, so that's my kit over here. Actually, I'll probably hang out in the hash center if you want to play with or talk NFC. This is all you really need to do quite a bit of NFC hacking and slashing. We've heard a couple mentions of the Proxmark 3. It's a wonderful tool. You can do damn near anything you can do with any other NFC device. The PN532, it's actually a Arduino shield, and you can emulate cards, you can emulate tags, all kinds of fun stuff. I carry a Galaxy Nexus, which has NFC capability. Most of the NFC work I do is actually right from this device. Cables, and again, it all fits in that small Pelican case that made it through TSA security twice a couple days ago. So it's really easy to move around with this stuff, and there's quite a lot you can do. With that kit alone, you can edit and read and write any of the tags, assuming no good crypto on the Felica or Desfire and no good crypto there. In the case of MyFair, you can break the crypto extremely fast. I'll show you that later. And you can actually put the antenna of the Proxmark between an NFC exchange and sniff the actual transaction. So depending on which card type some of them run encrypted, most of them don't. And again, emulating tags and devices. If you've got an 18092 badge for your office to get in the door, it's actually pretty bloody trivial to snarf the UID off that and clone it with the Proxmark. Hello? Oh, are you kidding me? There we go. Whoop. Okay. So when I encounter a tag in the wild, and being the NFC guy I am, I'm always kind of keen to scan it. The first thing I do is I love this one, NXP tag info. It reads the tag and shows you what's on the tag. If you don't bring up one of these apps first, you're going to find out that it's going to the OS, if the phone can, will actually act on the tag. So if it's a URL or an email address or something like that, it'll actually do what it can to act on the tag without giving you the opportunity to decide whether you want to do this. So I bring up one of these guys. You can get full hex dumps, or if in the case of NFC, it gives you a full protocol dump of what's there. Really premium. Like I said, that's why I use my phone probably the most. Another fun tool is the Eclipse Editor plugin. You can structure the NFC message in kind of the standard Eclipse pull-down structure kind of menu. It generates a QR code. There's also a web-based version, and there's an app that can scan the QR code, and the next tag that touches it will be written with that tag. So for trying things like fuzzing and stuff like that, this is just a really easy way to quickly iterate through a lot of combinations. All right. So I've been saying that MyFair-based crypto keys are crap. See if I can give you kind of an example here. 3 weeks ago, our team was in Tokyo, all 20 of us for a team face-to-face meeting. I check into the hotel, and you should have seen the smile on my face when they handed me a MyFair 1K card. I had my gear with me, scanned it in the elevator on the way up, and sure enough, there was one sector that was encrypted with a key, and the rest was filled with zeros. I think I knew where my target was. Got to the room, quick shower. Within 45 minutes of arriving at the hotel, I had the crypto key. So within an hour, I had made a copy of my room key. All right. Good step one. Clone the card, easy to do. Copy line for line, or byte for byte to the new card. Same key, same place. Easy. Beep. Door opens. Game over. So I decided to take it a step further. As the guys rolled in, sitting at the bar with my phone, now that it had the key in it, I could actually just read the card right from the mobile. Everyone who would let me, they let me then. I'd scan their card. And try to figure out what the format was. Turned out to be pretty easy. 945E is just junk. The 5D here is the guest number. If you're not familiar with hotel key systems, they have a guest number. And every time you check in a new guest, they increment that number. And the lock will automatically ignore anything before that number. All right. So, basically the idea is no matter what other keys out there exist, when they hand the next guest their key, the first time they use it in the lock, it's going to obliterate all the previous keys. We've got a date. It's kind of interesting. This is a hex dump, and I checked out on October 13th. Gets better. That's a hex dump. That's the time. Checkout was 1 o'clock. It was nice of them to give me half an hour and a second. Then we've got the room ID. Turns out it's a monotonically increasing number. If you walk down the hall, every door is the next number. And finally, I discovered the hard way that the second line, which is mostly empty, included a bit for you're allowed to use the elevator or not. I tried a card with just that bit. Didn't work. So this is written in the one sector that's got a key on it. That's all that's there. The rest of the card is completely blank. All right, so we've got that. I can clone the card. Cool. All right, so we've got somebody in room 13, and their room ID is 30. And if somebody gives me the key, their key, and I find a room ID of 34, I can do some pretty quick math and figure out what room they're in. Turns out I was wrong. I was off by 1. The guy came down the next day and told me that the room next to his didn't exist. It was a sitting area. Scratch that out, and poof, if I had actually gone upstairs, I would have found the right room. So, all right, I can clone, and I can tell you your room number from the key. We're getting close. Now for the killer. We're sitting in the bar with the guy from 1225 and the guy from 1227. The guy from 1226 is sitting right back there. He was upstairs doing email. So 1225 and 1227 gave me their keys. Scanned them. That's some pretty easy math, don't you think? So Mr. 1226 was upstairs, mindlessly typing away on his email, and his manager knocked on the door. And there's a little debate about the exchange here. The guy coming to the door swears he heard "come in," so he did. Beep. Done. This is from never seeing his key. Never touched it, never had it. I did have to guess at the guest ID. And as it turned out, I screwed him later that day because he left my key that I made in the power slot and went downstairs with his key that is now invalid. So he gets downstairs and he comes back up, won't work, goes down to the desk, they give him a new key. And it turns out, so Sector 8 is where the room key was. All right? And the hotel desk recoded his key and added Sector 10 with the key. All zeros. So the theory is this actually resets the guest ID clock. At first we thought it was a master key, but that would have been just too lucky. So I just upgraded his previous key, so they both had the same guest ID, and we're all good. All right, so unfortunately for Larry, he used 1K keys. John was able to reverse engineer it in a heartbeat. Now John has his own promotion. Purchase one meal at John's restaurant and get a free starter at Larry's. You can just crank these cards out. It's no problem. All right, so one of the other things you'll notice with NFC stuff is they've all got that anti-collision ID. So when multiple devices show up in the field at the same time, the device can discern which one it wants to talk to. Be very careful here. On the MyFair series, the manufacturer has already announced they've rolled over keys. So don't use the anti-collision code for any form of security. One, it's possible to get another card. Two, it's possible to clone it with a device and just emulate it. And three, it's actually surprisingly easy to call China and get a card that looks and feels exactly like a MyFair, but ignores the requirements about not writing over the UID. So the knockoff cards are easy to get your hands on, easy to clone. You'd be surprised how many businesses use just that UID as the token to get you in the front door. I won't mention one that's near and dear to my heart. Excuse me. All right. So if you're out there in the wild, my basic rule is if you wouldn't lick the tag, if you don't know where it's been, use an app to scan it. Find out what's on it before you scan it. I mean, I know the whole idea of NFC is to make it fast and easy to just kind of beep, and you've got whatever it is they're selling, unless you know for a fact what they're selling. I'm not sure I trust it. Never trust the 14A keys for anything. The Desfire and the Velkas are generally fine right now. Again, never trust the UID for anything. And except at this point in the case of the Falcon and the Desfire, don't trust the cards for stored value, unless you're talking about French fries and something simple. And apparently I've had too much caffeine because I blew right through. Any questions?
Just one small question. Is MyFair the only 40A implementation, or is there any other implementation?
No, Topaz is also A. And yeah, so both of the NXPs are the NXP 2, 1, and the NXP type 5 are all 14A.
But they are not affected by the attacks that affect MyFair Classic.
The Topaz and the type 1 and type 2s don't have that key structure. They don't claim to be that secure in the first place. So they're not affected because they don't offer it.
Thank you.
Hey, you mentioned that the hotel card sector was encrypted. What sort of encryption was used?
It was protected by a key. Encrypted was the wrong word. That's my bad. So in the MyFair exchange, when you start up, you have to, in the case of the one case, you have to address the sector and say, I want to authenticate, here's my key. And if you authenticate correctly, you'll get good data. If you don't, you get bogus junk. There is a little bit of alleged cryptography going on between them, and that's one of the reasons it's so easy to break. The attack against it is actually a very simple side channel. I think it's every 4 or 5 failed attempts, it sends back a knack with what appears to be random junk, and if you pay enough attention to it and know what the key is, you can kind of work out the pattern, and that's how the it's called the nested attack. That's how that works. It does require having one key that you know on the card. There is another attack that uses similar methods that doesn't require any keys. You don't have to know anything about the card to get one key back.
Thanks.
What about payment cards, credit cards? I understand that it's also planned to equip those with NFC technology.
Well, all right. It's not pure NFC. It's not trademark NFC because it doesn't exchange NDEF. Those are mostly using the Desfire cards, and one of the extension options for Desfire is where you can essentially embed a SIM chip in there with all the the crypto standards that come with that. So the idea is it actually generates a unique number every time you read it. So the idea is, based on time and everything else, in theory, those are hard to duplicate. I mean, yeah, you can read the number at one point in time, but if you don't use it right away, it won't be valid by the time you get there.
I recently heard about an implementation from, I think, YubiKey.
Yes.
That was announcing a YubiKey token via NFC to be used as a second factor for authentication.
Correct.
Can you imagine that something like that, after what you said here, can be secure?
I've actually played with that implementation a little bit. A friend of mine in the audience has one, and I haven't gone into great detail, but it's actually using type 1, and it's generating a unique token every time you scan it. So the assumption is there's either some kind of RTC going on in there, or we've tried cloning, try a read and then use that token and haven't been able to successfully get it to work. So I also should note that it's not the NFC is actually built into the chip. It's not a standard tag. So from what I've seen, it's a pretty good implementation. I haven't actually tried to tear it apart yet, but it's pretty simple where it's passing an opaque token that should only be valid for a certain period of time. Anything else? All right.